Fresh perspectives, Sarah. That's what this department needs. Those were the exact words my boss Marcus Hartwell said to me on that gray Tuesday morning at 9:17 a.m. as he announced that the promotion I'd been promised for 18 months was going to his 19-year-old mistress instead. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 34 years old, and I've been a senior operations manager at Hartwell & Associates marketing firm in downtown Seattle for the past 8 years. As I sat in that sterile conference room, watching Bella Rodriguez barely out of high school smirk from behind Marcus's shoulder, I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply nodded, thanked him for his honesty, and walked back to my desk. That was the moment Marcus Hartwell sealed his own fate, though he wouldn't realize it for another 6 weeks. Let me paint you a picture of what I'd built at Hartwell & Associates. When I started there in 2016, the company was hemorrhaging clients due to poor project management and missed deadlines. I came in with a master's degree in business operations and a track record of turning failing departments around. Within 2 years, I'd restructured their entire workflow system, implemented new client retention protocols, and personally managed relationships with our 3 biggest accounts: Morrison Electronics, $2.3 million annually, Pacific Northwest Retail Group, $1.8 million, and Cascade Financial Services, $1.4 million. These 3 clients alone represented 67% of our total revenue. Marcus knew this. Everyone knew this. When clients had problems, they didn't call Marcus, they called me. When new employees needed training, Marcus sent them to me. When crisis management was needed, Marcus disappeared and left me to handle it. For 8 years, I'd been the backbone, holding that company together, working 60-hour weeks, sacrificing weekends, and postponing my own dreams. The promotion to Director of Client Operations had been discussed since January 2023. Marcus had promised it to me repeatedly, always with some excuse about waiting for the right time or budget approvals. Meanwhile, I'd been doing the director-level work without the title or the salary. The position came with a $40,000 raise, bringing my salary to $95,000, plus a corner office, and equity shares in the company. But Marcus had other plans. I first noticed Bella in March, when she started showing up to the office as an intern. Fresh-faced, blonde, and exactly Marcus's type. His wife Catherine had been blonde once too, before 15 years of marriage and 2 kids aged her into exhausted brunette. Bella giggled at Marcus's jokes, wore skirts that were just unprofessional enough to be noticeable, and somehow always needed mentoring that required closed-door meetings. The signs were all there. Marcus started staying late on nights when Catherine had her book club. He upgraded his wardrobe, trading his usual rumpled khakis for expensive suits. His wedding ring disappeared for days at a time, reappearing with convenient excuses about rashes and the gym. He began taking mysterious lunch meetings and making hushed phone calls. I documented everything, not because I suspected an affair initially, but because I've always been meticulous about workplace dynamics. In my line of work, understanding office politics isn't optional, it's survival. I kept detailed notes about client interactions, project timelines, and yes, unusual behavior patterns. It's a habit that saved my career more than once. The real revelation came on April 15th, when I was working late and heard Marcus and Bella in his office. The walls were thin, and their conversation was illuminating. "Baby, when are you going to make this official?" Bella's voice was petulant, whining. "Soon, Angel. I promise. Once I get Sarah out of the way and move you into that director position, we'll have more than enough money to make a clean break." "But she's so smart, Marcus. What if she figures out what we're doing?" Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. "Sarah? She's brilliant at operations, but she's completely naive about people. She still thinks hard work and loyalty matter. She'll never see this coming." That conversation changed everything. I realized this wasn't just about workplace politics or even an affair. This was a calculated plan to steal my career and use my own competence to fund Marcus's escape from his marriage. They were going to use the director position, the one I'd essentially been doing unpaid for 2 years, as their ticket to a new life together. I could have confronted them. I could have gone to HR or threatened to tell Catherine. But I'd learned something important in my years of crisis management. Emotional reactions lead to suboptimal outcomes. Instead, I did what I do best. I planned. First, I needed to understand the full scope of their scheme. Over the next 3 weeks, I conducted my own investigation. I arrived early, stayed late, and used my administrative access to review financial records, client communications, and project files. What I found was even worse than I'd imagined. Marcus had been skimming money from client accounts for months. Nothing huge, just enough to stay under the radar. A few hundred here from Morrison Electronics' media budget, 1,000 there from Pacific Northwest's consulting fees. He'd created fake vendor accounts and inflated project costs, pocketing the difference. By my calculations, he'd stolen approximately $73,000 over 6 months. But that wasn't the most damaging discovery. The real bombshell was in his email communications with potential investors. Marcus had been secretly negotiating to sell 60% of the company to Meridian Holdings, a corporate acquisition firm, without informing his current business partners. He was planning to take the money and run, leaving everyone else, employees, partners, clients, holding the bag. The timeline became clear. Promote Bella to create a paper trail of transition planning, execute the sale to Meridian, then disappear with both the acquisition money and the skimmed funds. It was ambitious, elaborate, and absolutely illegal. I copied everything. Financial, records, email communications, client files, vendor information. I stored it all on an encrypted external drive that I kept in a safety deposit box I'd opened for this specific purpose. In my experience, the most important rule of crisis management is documentation beats accusation every time. Next, I needed allies. The first was Janet Morrison from Morrison Electronics. Janet and I had worked together for 6 years, and she'd often mentioned how much she valued our partnership. When I called her for lunch on May 2nd, she immediately sensed something was wrong. "Sarah, you look like someone just told you Christmas was canceled. What's going on?" I was careful with my words. "Janet, if you ever had concerns about account management at Hartwell & Associates, who would you prefer to work with?" Her answer was immediate. "You, obviously. You know that. Marcus is charming enough, but you're the one who actually gets things done. Why?" Instead of answering directly, I asked, would Morrison Electronics be interested in following its account management to a different firm if the situation at Hartwell became unstable? Janet leaned back in her chair, studying my face. "Sarah Chen, I've known you long enough to recognize that look. You're planning something, aren't you?" "I'm preparing for contingencies," I replied. "Sometimes loyalty isn't rewarded the way it should be." By the end of lunch, I had Janet's assurance that Morrison Electronics would follow me wherever I went, as long as I gave them proper notice. Similar conversations with contacts at Pacific Northwest and Cascade yielded the same results. It seemed my relationships with these clients were even stronger than I'd realized. The second ally was completely unexpected. Catherine Hartwell herself. Catherine and I had met several times at company events, and I'd always found her intelligent and perceptive. On May 10th, she called me directly, something that had never happened before. "Sarah, I hope you don't mind me reaching out, but I wanted to ask you something in confidence." "Of course, Catherine. What can I help you with? Has Marcus been acting strangely at work lately? He's been bringing up your name a lot and not always kindly. It's not like him, you two have always worked well together." I chose my words carefully. "There have been some changes in office dynamics recently. I'm not sure I'm the right person to discuss Marcus's state of mind." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, I know my husband. I've been married to him for 15 years. He's cheating on me, isn't he?" "Catherine, please. I'm not asking you to betray confidentialities, but I'm drowning here. He comes home smelling like different perfume. He's spending money we don't have, and he keeps talking about big changes coming soon. I just need to know if my instincts are right." Something in her voice, desperation mixed with determination, reminded, Me of myself 8 years ago, when I'd been fighting to prove my worth in a male-dominated industry. I made a decision that would prove crucial later. Catherine, I think you should document your concerns. Financial records, behavioral changes, anything unusual. And you might want to consult with a good attorney, just to understand your options. I didn't tell her about Bella directly, but I'd given her the framework to discover it herself. Sometimes the most effective help is teaching someone to help themselves. May 18th arrived with the announcement I'd been expecting. Marcus called an all-staff meeting at 10 a.m. sharp. The entire team gathered in the main conference room, all 12 employees, from junior associates to senior managers. Marcus stood at the head of the table, Bella beside him like some kind of twisted presentation assistant. I have some exciting news to share, Marcus began, his voice carrying that false enthusiasm he used with difficult clients. We're implementing some strategic changes to position the company for future growth. He gestured toward Bella, who was wearing what appeared to be her most professional outfit, though on her, professional still looked like she was playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. Effective immediately, Bella Rodriguez will be taking over as Director of Client Operations. She brings fresh perspectives and innovative approaches that will help us capture new market opportunities. The room was silent. Not the comfortable silence of people processing good news, but the awkward, heavy silence of people trying not to react to obvious bullshit. My colleague, Mike Patterson, who'd been with the company almost as long as I had, actually coughed in what sounded like surprise. Marcus continued, oblivious to, or perhaps ignoring the atmosphere. Sarah will be transitioning to a consulting role, helping to train Bella and ensure a smooth handover of responsibilities. A consulting role. That was a particularly creative euphemism for demotion with a pay cut. Bella stepped forward, and I almost winced at the secondhand embarrassment of what she was about to say. Thank you, Marcus. I'm really excited to bring some young energy to client relationships. I think a lot of our accounts are stuck in old-fashioned approaches, and it's time to shake things up with some millennial strategies. Millennial strategies. She'd actually said millennial strategies in a professional setting. I caught Mike's eye across the table. He looked like he was experiencing physical pain. Jennifer Walsh, our senior account coordinator, was staring at her notepad with the expression of someone trying very hard not to laugh or cry. Marcus wrapped up the meeting with some generic comments about exciting transitions and new directions. As people filed out, the whispered conversations started immediately. 8 years of building respect and relationships, and everyone in that room knew this was insane. But I just smiled, shook Bella's hand, and congratulated her on the promotion. Thank you so much, Sarah, she gushed. Marcus has told me wonderful things about your work. I'm sure you'll be a great teacher. I'm sure you'll learn quickly, I replied. Client management can be tricky, but I have confidence you'll figure it out. If Marcus had been paying attention to my tone rather than admiring Bella's enthusiasm, he might have realized that confidence and optimism are not the same thing. The next morning, I began what I privately called the handover. I'd scheduled meetings with all our major clients to introduce them to their new account manager. I was professionally courteous, meticulously thorough, and absolutely ruthless in my preparation. The first meeting was with Morrison Electronics at 10 a.m. on May 19th. Janet Morrison sat across from Bella and me in the Morrison conference room, surrounded by her marketing team. I'd prepared a comprehensive handover document detailing every aspect of their account. But I'd also prepared something else. A detailed presentation of exactly what Morrison had invested in their relationship with Hartwell and Associates. As you can see, I explained, clicking through the presentation, over our 6-year partnership, Morrison Electronics has invested $13.8 million in marketing services. The campaign strategies I developed increased your market share by 34% in the Pacific Northwest, and the customer retention programs we implemented saved you approximately $2.3 million in acquisition costs. Janet nodded, taking notes. Bella sat beside me, trying to look engaged, but clearly overwhelmed by the technical details. Bella, Janet said suddenly, what's your background in electronics marketing? Bella brightened. Well, I don't have specific experience in electronics, But I think marketing is really about understanding people, you know? Like electronics are just tools, but what people really want is to feel connected and empowered by technology. The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife. Janet's marketing director actually raised his eyebrows. "I see," Janet said slowly. "And what strategies would you implement to improve our Q4 performance in the Seattle market?" Bella glanced at me hopefully. "Well, I think we should definitely leverage social media more. Maybe some Instagram influencer partnerships, young people. Really respond to authentic brand storytelling." Janet made a note. Morrison Electronics' primary customer base is 35 to 65 years old, with 78% of our sales coming from B2B relationships. How would influencer marketing address those demographics? Bella's confident smile wavered. "Oh, well, I mean, older people use Instagram too, right?" I watched Janet's expression shift from polite interest to barely concealed alarm. This was worse than I'd hoped. The meeting concluded with Janet requesting detailed transition timelines and asking if I would be available for consulting support during the adjustment period. I assured her I would be, though I mentioned I was also exploring other opportunities. As we walked back to the office, Bella was unusually quiet. "That was harder than I expected," she finally admitted. "Client management is complex," I agreed. "It takes time to understand each account's specific needs and history. Morrison Electronics is particularly detail-oriented. Maybe you could sit in on my first few client calls? Just until I get the hang of it?" I smiled sympathetically. "Of course. Though I should mention, I'll be taking some vacation time next week to consider my career options." What I didn't mention was that my vacation time would be spent interviewing with Cascade Marketing Solutions, Hartwell & Associates' biggest competitor. By Friday of that first week, the situation had deteriorated faster than I'd anticipated. Bella had managed to offend Pacific Northwest Retail Group by suggesting they were behind the times in their approach to customer engagement. She'd double-booked 2 client meetings and showed up to the wrong location for a third. Most spectacularly, she'd sent Morrison Electronics a campaign proposal that was clearly a template she'd found online, complete with placeholder text reading, "Insert client name here," in 3 different locations. Marcus was starting to look strained. He'd been compensating for Bella's mistakes by personally handling crisis calls and offering discounts to annoyed clients. The fresh perspectives he'd praised were turning into expensive damage control. But the real disaster was yet to come. On Monday morning, May 25th, I arrived at the office to find Marcus pacing in his office, his phone pressed to his ear with obvious frustration. "Understand your concerns, but I assure you this was just a technical error." I knocked on his door. "Frame." He looked up, relief flooding his face. "Sarah! Thank God! I need you to handle the Morrison Electronics situation immediately." "What situation?" Marcus covered his phone. "Bella accidentally sent Morrison's confidential campaign data to 3 of their competitors on Friday. Janet Morrison is threatening to terminate our contract immediately." I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. I hadn't anticipated this specific disaster, but I'd prepared for something like it. "That's unfortunate," I said calmly. "What would you like me to do?" "Fix it. You have the relationship with Janet. Smooth this over." "Marcus, I'm in a consulting role now, remember? And I believe I mentioned I'm taking vacation time this week to explore other opportunities." For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus looked genuinely frightened. "Sarah, please. I know the transition has been rough, but I need your help here. The Morrison account is worth $2.3 million annually." "Yes," I agreed. "It is." I let that hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "I'll see what I can do, but I can't make any promises. Confidentiality breaches are serious matters." What I didn't tell him was that Janet Morrison had called me directly that morning, and we'd already scheduled a meeting for Tuesday to discuss future partnership opportunities. Tuesday's meeting with Janet took place at Cascade Marketing Solutions' downtown office. I'd been interviewing with Cascade's CEO, David Kim, for the past week, and the conversation had been remarkably straightforward. "Sarah, I'll be direct," David had said during our first meeting. "I've been trying to figure out how to compete with Hartwell & Associates for years. Your client relationships are legendary in this industry. If you're interested in making a change, I'd like to offer you a director position with a $30,000 raise and equity options. But the offer that really caught my attention came when Janet Morrison joined our Tuesday meeting. "David, I want to be clear about Morrison Electronics' position," Janet said. "We're terminating our contract with Hartwell and Associates immediately. The confidentiality breach was the final straw, but honestly, we've been concerned about their stability for months. We'd like to move our entire account to Cascade, with the understanding that Sarah will be our primary relationship manager." David smiled. "That's $2.3 million in annual business, correct?" "Correct. And I've spoken with contacts at Pacific Northwest Retail Group and Cascade Financial Services. They're interested in similar arrangements." I felt a rush of vindication. 3 clients, representing over $5.5 million in annual revenue, ready to follow me to a competitor. Marcus had handed me the keys to his own destruction. By Thursday, the exodus was complete. Pacific Northwest Retail Group cited concerns about account management consistency. Cascade Financial Services mentioned strategic realignment needs. Morrison Electronics' termination letter referenced fundamental breaches of professional standards. Marcus called me Thursday afternoon. His voice barely controlled panic. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you have anything to do with these client departures?" I was in my apartment, packing up 8 years' worth of personal items from my home office. Cascade had offered to buy out my non-compete clause and start immediately. "Marcus, are you asking if I encouraged our clients to breach their contracts?" "I'm asking if you sabotaged this company because you were upset about the promotion." Something cold settled in my voice. "Marcus, I never made a single disparaging comment about Hartwell and Associates to any client. I never encouraged anyone to terminate their contracts. I simply answered honestly when clients asked about my availability for future consulting work. This is going to destroy us. Do you understand that? Without those 3 accounts, we can't make payroll." "That's unfortunate," I said, echoing his own words from countless conversations where he'd dismissed my concerns. "Perhaps you should have considered the risks before making such dramatic personnel changes." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. "Sarah," he finally said, "what would it take to get you to come back? We can discuss the director position again." "I'm afraid that's not possible. I've accepted a position elsewhere." "Where?" "Cascade Marketing Solutions. I start Monday." Another long silence. "You planned this," he said finally. "This whole thing was revenge." I considered my response carefully. "Marcus, I planned nothing except my own career transition. The client relationships were built through 8 years of competent professional service. The personnel decisions that led to client dissatisfaction were made entirely by Hartwell and Associates management. The market consequences of those decisions were predictable to anyone with industry experience." "That's a very lawyerly way of saying you screwed me." "No, Marcus. That's a very professional way of saying you screwed yourself." Friday morning, I drove to Hartwell and Associates one final time to collect my remaining personal items. The office was eerily quiet. Several employees had already been laid off, and others were obviously interviewing elsewhere. Bella was nowhere to be seen. I found Marcus in his office, staring at spreadsheets with the expression of a man watching his house burn down. "Sarah." He looked up as I passed his door. "Can we talk?" I stopped, holding my box of personal items. "Of course. I know you hate me right now, but I want you to understand something. The company is finished. We'll be bankrupt by the end of next month. 12 people are going to lose their jobs." I felt a flicker of something not quite regret, but awareness of the collateral damage. "That's unfortunate," I said. "What happened to Bella?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "Bella? She quit Tuesday, said this job was too stressful and she wanted to focus on her modeling career. Turns out her idea of a relationship was expensive dinners and shopping trips, not dealing with actual consequences." "I see. She cleaned out the petty cash account on her way out. $3,000. Not that it matters now." I absorbed this information without comment. Marcus continued, almost talking to himself. Catherine filed for divorce yesterday. She hired some shark attorney who somehow got access to all our financial records. Did you know she could do that? I had known, actually. Community property laws in Washington state are quite specific about financial disclosure in divorce proceedings. I'm sorry to hear about your personal difficulties, I said. Marcus looked up at me with something like admiration. You really did plan all of this, didn't you? The client meetings, the documentation, even Catherine finding out about Bella. This was all calculated. I considered lying, but decided the truth would be more satisfying. Marcus, I documented everything because documentation is good business practice. I built client relationships because that's my job. I explored other career opportunities because I was being demoted despite 8 years of excellent performance. I didn't plan your affair, your embezzlement, your decision to promote an unqualified teenager, or your wife's reaction to discovering your behavior. His face went pale. Embezzlement? What are you talking about? I smiled. The $73,000 in falsified vendor payments over the past 6 months. Did you think no one would notice? How do you... He stopped, realization dawning. You copied the financial records. I copied my own work product, which included financial analysis I'd been asked to prepare. What I did with that information afterward is entirely legal. Sarah, please, if this gets out... Marcus, it's already gotten out. Catherine's attorney subpoenaed all company financial records as part of the divorce proceedings. I imagine the IRS will be very interested in the discrepancies. He collapsed back in his chair, the fight going out of him completely. Why? He asked finally. Why destroy everything? I set down my box and looked at him. Really looked at him. 8 years of working. Relationship. Of professional respect. Of believing that competence and loyalty mattered. All of it destroyed by greed and ego. Marcus, I didn't destroy everything. I simply removed myself from a situation where I wasn't valued. Everything else, the client departures, the financial investigation, the collapse of your personal life, those are the natural consequences of your own choices. But you could have stopped it. You could have helped me fix things. Yes, I agreed. I could. Have. For 8 years, I did exactly that. I fixed your mistakes, covered your weaknesses, and made you look competent to clients and partners. But you threw that away for a teenager with nice legs and no qualifications. I picked up my box again. The difference between us, Marcus, is that I understand the value of genuine relationships. You confused loyalty with stupidity and competence with interchangeability. Those mistakes have consequences. As I reached the door, he called, after me one last time. Sarah, what am I supposed to do now? I paused, considering. Learn to live with the consequences of your choices. It's a valuable skill. That was the last conversation I had with Marcus Hartwell. Cascade Marketing Solutions proved to be everything Hartwell and Associates wasn't. David Kim valued experience and competence. The team was professional and collaborative, and my client relationships transferred seamlessly. Within 3 months, I was managing twice. The account volume I'd handled at Hartwell, with a 40% salary increase and genuine opportunities for advancement. The Morrison, Pacific Northwest, and Cascade financial accounts flourished under proper management. Janet Morrison sent a handwritten note 3 months after the transition. Sarah, working with you reminds me why business relationships matter. Thank you for maintaining such high standards. The aftermath for Hartwell and Associates was swift and brutal. The company filed for bankruptcy in July, exactly 6 weeks after I'd started at Cascade. The financial investigation triggered by Catherine's divorce proceedings revealed not only the embezzlement I'd discovered, but additional irregularities going back 3 years. Marcus faced both civil and criminal charges. Catherine Hartwell, meanwhile, proved remarkably resilient. The divorce settlement gave her controlling interest in the company's remaining assets, which she sold to pay legal fees and start fresh. She sent me a brief email in August. Thank you for the advice about documentation. It made all the difference. Bella Rodriguez's modeling career apparently consisted of an Instagram account with 3,000 followers. The last I heard, she was working retail at the mall, Though I only know this because Jennifer Walsh, who'd also moved to Cascade, mentioned seeing her there. The most satisfying epilogue came 6 months later, when David Kim offered me a partnership track position. Sarah, you've brought in $8.2 million in new business this year. I think it's time we discussed making this ownership stake official. As I sat in David's office, negotiating equity percentages and profit-sharing agreements, I thought about Marcus's question, what am I supposed to do now? The answer, I'd learned, was simple. You build something better. People often ask me if I feel guilty about what happened to Hartwell and Associates. The truth is more complex than guilt or satisfaction. Marcus made choices to have an affair, to steal money, to promote unqualified personnel, to sacrifice long-term stability for short-term gratification. I simply refused to absorb the consequences of those choices. Every successful professional learns this eventually. Loyalty given does not guarantee loyalty received. Competence demonstrated does not prevent being undervalued. Hard work performed does not ensure fair treatment. But competence, loyalty, and hard work do create options. And sometimes, the most powerful response to betrayal is not revenge. It's simply removing your competence from the equation and allowing natural consequences to unfold. 6 weeks. That's how long it took for Marcus's fresh perspectives to destroy what I'd spent 8 years building. But it took 8 years of competence to make that destruction inevitable. The best revenge, I learned, isn't a dish served cold. It's a life served well, somewhere else, by someone who finally understands your value. And sometimes karma doesn't need help at all. It just needs competent people to stop preventing it from working.